It really was one of the great Etihad nights for Manchester City with that 4-1 win over Arsenal. It felt like anything but a title decider in terms of the gap between the two sides on the field of play. Manchester City, what a run of form they are now in. They've won their last 12 Premier League games in a row against Arsenal. They've now won 7 Premier League games in a row. They are unbeaten in their last 17 games in all competitions. They've won every single game they played at the Etihad Stadium this year, and they've scored 44 goals in their last 12 home games. It is a sensational run of form from Pep Guardiola's side, just at the right time. As always, to talk about Manchester City, I'm joined on the line by Sam Lee of The Athletic. How are you keeping, Sam?
Hello, yeah, very well, thank you, very well.
They know how to time their run.
They do. You know, it's one of the big questions is how they've managed to dig this form out. Because, look, I know a lot of people were expecting exactly this. Earlier in the season, Arsenal were top, and everyone was like, well, they'll collapse and City will win it. And in fairness, it looks like that's where we're heading. But there was that relatively rough spell in January and February.
You sound like you were a doubter. I'll be honest, I was a doubter. I felt that it would improve, but I also felt there was so many flaws there at the time that they would probably drop too many points that Arsenal might just be able to hold them off. But they have shown the form of last year, of 2019, when they won 14 games in a row in the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of my doubt, I went from when they lost to Spurs at the start of February, I went from they're definitely going to win it to they still can win it, but they're going to need Arsenal to drop a load of points. Because what I thought City could still win it, but not go on a run like they are now and look so fantastic as they are now, but maybe win 3 games, draw 1, win 3 games, lose 1, and carry on being that inconsistent. But if Arsenal dropped away so much, it wouldn't matter. That was kind of how I envisaged it. So in terms of being a doubter, yeah, I didn't actually see a run like this. I still thought they could win it, but not in the manner that it looks like they might do.
In saying that, and there's definitely a recency bias in this from watching them last night and even against Liverpool a few weeks ago and the performance earlier in the season against United, is this the best version of a Pep Guardiola Manchester City you've seen?
Yeah, I think it may be. Because they've got all the usual things you expect of a Guardiola side, like the organisation, the patience, which, patience was a huge factor last night, just waiting for Arsenal to come to them, and the incision, the technical ability. But one, they've got Haaland, and two, they've just got solid defenders. And if they can't control a game with possession and they do get counter-attacked on, they're much better at standing up to it, just making tackles, making blocks. And it does seem like they were a bit more rounded because they were very complete last year. They were very close to reaching the Champions League final again. The Real Madrid thing happened. They won the league again. The year before that, they won the league and they did get to the Champions League final. So they're obviously amazing anyway. But then you add in that Haaland factor and just basically the ability to play on the transition now. If they win the ball high up, or if they can lure you in from goal kicks and suddenly play through you quickly. It looks like a counter-attack, but it isn't. But they can play that way now, and they've got that kind of devastating factor. A bit like they had when they won 100 points with Sane and Sterling. But I think I'm tempted to say even more so. Maybe that's the recency bias. But, when you see De Bruyne do something like he did last night and Haaland just do what he does all the time, and the way Grealish is flying at the moment, they've just got so many different weapons. And again, mentioning Grealish, not just going forward, but
Tracking back,
going backwards as well. Like they do seem to have everything.
You sort of touched on it there. Another side of it that we don't talk a lot with Manchester City is the physicality. That if it comes to a scrap, they can stand up to anybody. And I was hanging around the mix zone last night, and Bernardo Silva, to contradict my point, walked past. And it is remarkable that you look at this little guy and go, one of the most talented footballers in the world, and 5'0". But you then look at Rodri. Akanji's not the tallest, but built like an absolute tank. Ruben Diaz, what Haaland has happened. De Bruyne has a good physical presence. And in those crucial games against other teams in the top 6, it's felt this season that physically the other teams haven't been able to deal with them.
That could be the case. You can see that Rodri in particular can really mix it. Rodri has got this great ability to, if he's not necessarily out of position, but if he's a few yards away from where the ball's dropping and he needs to make it, he can get there. There was a couple of times last night where, there was one time I remember he was surrounded by 3 players and it didn't seem like the smart option, but he kind of just took the I'm going to barrel through all of these guys route. Yeah, they definitely can mix it. Funnily enough, a friend of mine who's a big City fan, has been watching them for years. He messaged me earlier on and he was like, "Do you think that was the tallest team that Guardiola's ever picked?" He was like, "I'm not sure about Bayern Munich, but surely from Barca and surely from his City team." And I mean, yeah, ironically, they were probably better at set pieces last year. I remember they had a good threat with Diaz, although I mean, Diaz aerially is a presence, but he's not actually that good in the air. But he's tall and he's threatening. They had Laporte and they had Rodri, and then Stones when he was playing. But now, because of they play four centre backs, they've got Akanji in there as well. Diaz, Ake when he's there, Stones as well, Rodri and Haaland. So you're right, like they are physical. But you're right about Bernardo Silva too, but also Gundogan. When people say about Ilkay Gundogan, it's the base level kind of, oh yeah, he's good on the ball, nice passer, and he can score goals. But the second balls, the way he gets around and he knows where the ball's going to drop. He gets in, he wins it with great physicality. Very good at getting in the way and buying a foul if he needs to. He's so good at that. He's not big at all by any means, but in terms of physicality, you've got him as well. Grealish is a strong lad. Like we just mentioned a minute ago, running back, that is definitely a part of it, that physicality.
So a lot of the focus today has been on Arsenal and their collapse and 3 draws coming into this and then not turning up last night. Last night, was it a case that they didn't turn up or City didn't allow them to turn up? Because again, it felt like from minute one, City were there.
Yes, well, City were. And the thing is, Arteta himself was very disappointed in how Arsenal turned up. He kind of said we didn't do all the things that we're good at, and that was the case. I just think City did a job on them, I think it was as simple as that. That can happen, but it didn't feel like you were there. I'm not sure if you've been there in the past, but those big games against Liverpool, those kind of title deciding kind of games, it didn't feel that tension. It didn't feel like this other team is going to come back no matter what. Even when Liverpool were there 3-1 down a couple of weeks ago, I thought, what, it wouldn't surprise me if they drew this 3-3. And maybe that's just the aura of Liverpool and their past brilliance and all that kind of stuff.
Well, you think back to this time last year and the 2-2, and it was kind of drawing that comparison as well after the game, that there were periods in that game where Manchester City just ripped Liverpool apart, where it felt like there was this massive chasm between the two sides, that City were miles ahead of them. But Liverpool had a way, when City were in that, of just hanging on in there and waiting for their own spell, and their own spell would come, and they'd have 15 minutes where they'd be on top and they'd relieve the pressure and they'd be quite dominant. And I remember that day they came out after half time and they got at Manchester City, whereas Arsenal, they didn't have 60 seconds of that.
No, not really. And even we talk about this, and there was the statue reading out at the start about the consecutive wins against Arsenal. The thing was, a lot of those wins against Arsenal have come when, it goes back to Arsene Wenger's time when they were particularly soft in these games, and then just the intervening period where, under Emery and Arteta early on, they weren't up to much, and, City were obviously strong. So I was thinking last night, this is a different Arsenal. I don't think that record's especially relevant anymore. But ultimately, we did see that City are levels above them, but also, if we go back to that relatively rough period that we were talking about earlier, they beat Arsenal both times in those games. Now, Arsenal were the better team for large spells of the FA Cup game and the Premier League game at the Emirates. But City did win both of them. And they weren't massively, massively uncomfortable. They were certainly more uncomfortable than most teams make them. But they weren't massively uncomfortable. And that I think that kind of goes to show as well. That wasn't even City at their best in that period. That was probably the worst they've been playing. It wasn't bad by any means compared to other teams, but it's probably the worst they've played in 2 or 3 years, and they were still beating Arsenal then. And now, again, it comes to last night when City are on it. They're in that mood in terms of timing, everything. They know, and I think that spurred on. Guardiola keeps saying the players know now if they drop points, that's it, they're done. And I think that kind of mentality where it's do or die every single game, that's helped to kind of spur them on to what they're at now.
Yeah, Pep was on it from minute one as well. There was no great celebration when Kevin De Bruyne scored the goal. He was charging onto the pitch to have a pop at Ederson. In total contrast to Mikel Arteta, and look, everyone's probably criticised Arteta for being too emotional at times on the sideline, and is it distracting for the players the way he behaves? Like he never really moved from the edge of the technical area just with his arms crossed. Like it was.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought about that, but that's true.
And listen, maybe he thought that the occasion would take care of itself. But Guardiola is a fascinating watch on nights like that. You are always trying to second guess what he's thinking, what he's trying to do, what he's berating his players about when they're putting together what feels like such a flawless performance.
Yeah, you know what? I think I worked out, actually, that Ederson clip. So, I mean, if people haven't seen it, if you just typed in Guardiola Ederson on Twitter, you'd find it fairly easily. So he's celebrating the goal, and then he literally does remember a few seconds in that he needs to bollock Ederson for something. And I went back and had a look, and basically Ederson just, instead of playing the ball into either Rodri or Gundogan as the holding midfielder, so they can then pass it first time out to Diaz, and Diaz is in a bit of space and then can then bring the ball forward. He passes it to Stones, who's under pressure. So Stones has to go long. Now, it's that long ball from Stones that Haaland wins, flicks onto De Bruyne, and De Bruyne runs through and scores. So ultimately, it was good. It worked out very well, but it wasn't what they were supposed to be doing. That, you know, it didn't matter that it led to the goal after 6 minutes in the huge game. It wasn't what they were supposed to be doing. And in terms of like second guessing Guardiola or what they want, that is it, isn't it? Like that tells you everything you need to know. It worked out fine. He could have let it go, but no, that's not what you're supposed to do. Because next time, if you play it to Stones under pressure, he kicks it straight to Ødegaard or Xhaka in midfield. They give it to Jesus, and Jesus scores. And it's just that kind of pursuit of not perfection, but you know what I mean. Like there's a game plan. Stick to it. That's it.
We all try and second guess him when it comes to what the team and what the formation will be, and he's obviously gone with this John Stones in the middle of midfield option in recent weeks. Last night he went, it was a 4-4-2 really from Pep Guardiola, 4 across the back, 4 across the middle, and Kevin De Bruyne playing just off Erling Haaland. The decision to play Walker at right back and Akanji at left back, was that just out of respect for Arsenal and for the talents of Saka and Martinelli?
Yes, pretty much. Akanji said afterwards, because he'd seen him play against Bayern Munich, against Coman and Sane, and all of their different threats, and he's just very good at winning the duels. One-on-one player tries to go past him, he's just very good at stopping them. So he said, well, okay, well, maybe that works on Saka over that side, because obviously that's one of the things Ake's been doing during his spell at left back or left centre back or mix of the two. So he needed that, and he decided that Akanji was the man for that. And I think just by then moving that around, you still want to keep Stones and Diaz in there, and then the other one to come in. I think Walker's had the more football recently. He's played better recently. Laporte hasn't been in recently. He's going to go in the summer most likely. Don't think his attitude's been great. Certainly by what Guardiola was kind of hinting, or maybe I was reading between the lines. But yeah, Walker, he's played more recently. He's in a better rhythm, and we know, pacey wingers, tricky wingers. He's very good at shutting them down. So it did make sense in that sense. It did make sense. Maybe a bit of a gamble to move Akanji over to the left hand side, but it certainly paid off.
It feels like it's done, despite the fact that Arsenal are still top of the league.
Yes.
The only thing that maybe could derail City is the fixture list. That they still have 7 Premier League games to go. They have 3 more Premier League games over the next 10 days before they even start to think about Real Madrid, albeit against 3 teams that you would expect them to beat. That Madrid game now, where you have City, who it feels like are the best team in Europe, but Real Madrid, who are the masters of games like this and European football. How much of a focus do you think switches to that? Are we going to see rotation of players over the next 2 or 3 games?
Only when it's absolutely necessary. Last night Guardiola said De Bruyne had told him that he had some niggles in his leg and needed to come off. That kind of strikes me as the kind of normal thing that you get at this time of year. But now, if that means that it's a danger, if he can't play on Sunday against Fulham, because if he were to aggravate something, he'd be out for the rest of the season, then they wouldn't play him against Fulham. But if he was fine to play, he'll play against Fulham. There's until they're top and until they've got a big margin for error, and that might not come, because unless Arsenal lose like the next 2-3 games, they're not actually going to have a big margin for error. City are going to need to win their games to make sure they do overtake Arsenal with these games in hand, and to make sure that they've got enough points. There isn't a big margin for error, so no, there won't be like large scale rotation. It will only be dictated by players saying I can't play, or the doctor saying he's got a bit of a knock, we need to be careful. Otherwise, they will just push through. That Real Madrid game is huge, but what they got before that, they've got Fulham away, West Ham and Leeds. Okay, they're winnable games. So there is, if there was tiredness, there is room for 1, maybe 2 changes, but I wouldn't be expecting an awful lot. I mean, the good thing is they've got Foden coming back. They got Mahrez. So if you did need to make a couple, you've got two quality players right there. But I don't think they'll want to make a lot because that's just not how they. That's not how they do it. They kind of just push through for everything and see what happens. And maybe it's not always worked, but that is how they do it.
What's Haaland happy with from those 3 games? 6 goals. He's got to be thinking about a hat-trick against West Ham next Wednesday night.
Yeah, no, sorry, yeah, exactly. Against West Ham and Leeds, I did a podcast earlier. I was like, it wouldn't be a surprise if he got a hat-trick in both of those games, which is mad, really. And to be honest, if he got 2 in the first half and the game was done, they'd probably take him off at half time again. But it just goes to show that the standards he set, and okay, maybe in the media we still expect too much, but that is, it seems to be a reasonable expectation, or at least it's normal that people are saying, well, this guy's going to get 2 hat-tricks in the next 2 games. Or
he could have had it last night. He should have had it last night.
Yeah, well, he should have, really, exactly. So that goes to show as well, he's not actually that good. Bit of a joke.
49. No, we'll record that. We'll clip it up. There's the criticism of Erling Haaland. 33 Premier League goals, so it's a new record for a 38-game season. He's just one behind Cole and Shearer. 49 goals in all competitions. So that. So he'll get to 50. The 60 mark is definitely, when you look at the amount of games City have left, 60 is the one that always felt like that was a Dixie Dean number. It wasn't modern day English football at all. It was something from a bygone era where football wasn't the football that we know right now. You're around City. You've been covering them from when they first showed an interest in Erling Haaland. Your sense of what they've made of him this season, is this what was expected of Erling Haaland, or have even people at City been taken aback as to just how brilliant he has been?
Yeah, from what I can gather, I think just the extent of it has surprised people. They obviously expected a great goal scorer. That's why they kind of pushed the boat out to get him, and they made the big pitches about how they were going to look after him, and how they'd elongate his career and these kind of things. But the extent to which he scored these goals, I think, has taken people by surprise. They've seen a really good attitude as well, because you can do background checks on players, but you never really know until they're there. But he's incredibly supportive of all the other teammates. He's always working hard to improve, and despite the fact that we've got him down as this kind of formidable beast that does no wrong, he's always in there every day to improve. And I think that's the thing that's kind of impressed Guardiola the most. Like, they knew they were getting a quality player, but they've really been struck by that attitude since he's been here. And then I just how he's just exploded, really. Just this amount of goals. I always expected him to do well, but I didn't think like this. You know what I mean? I don't think he'll get to 60. But even though that's a
49,
conversation.
7 league games, 3 Champions League, and an FA Cup final.
Yeah, you do make.
You got 11 games. He needs 11 goals in 11 games. Come on.
I mean, the thing is as well, imagine how many he'd scored if they weren't. Like I said there, they made the big pitch about looking after his body. Imagine how many he'd scored if he just stayed on. But it is all about managing him and making sure he doesn't get injured. But then again, if you're saying you keep him on longer, then he does get injured and you miss 3-4 weeks and you don't get the amount of goals. But I suppose the point is, though, that amount of goals he has scored, it's not even in full 90 minutes. Sometimes he's coming off at half time and he scored twice. He's got a hat-trick after an hour and he's off. The 5 goals against Leipzig, when did he come off? With about half an hour to go, something like that, maybe even 20 minutes. But he's scoring all these goals in such a small amount of time as well in games. It is incredible. So maybe he does get to 60. Unbelievable. No, nobody expected that, I don't think.
It does feel that this title will really bring into focus Manchester City's just total and utter dominance of English football. First 3 in a row, 5 of the last 6. And the questions that are hanging over the club with the FA charges and the over 100 FA charges that they're facing. Is there any timeline as to when they're going to actually have to face those charges and when it'll all come to a head?
No, just a long way off in the future, basically. Just a long way off in the future. I mean, have they even assembled the independent panel yet? I don't think so. And when were the charges done? Start of February? It's just always seemed, the word was always and continues to be that it's going to be some way off that. And look, I mean, we don't know which way it's going to go, but I know that City genuinely believe that there's no big nasty surprise in store for them. They may be wrong, but it's not like a PR front. It is genuinely what they believe. So,
does it need to be a big nasty surprise if they're facing 100 separate charges over 4 years?
Well, but what I mean is they're not expecting for there to be any kind of guilty verdict on anything that would result in them losing titles or getting relegated, or like with the Champions League ban, basically they were guilty of not cooperating. but not the other stuff. And it's like, if that's the equivalent this time, I don't know fully what they're expecting that there may be guilt of. But if there is any, it doesn't. I don't think it sounds like it's going to be the kind of stuff where you're thinking, are they going to be able to go into the Championship or League Two? It's just like
they're not worried about asterisks over titles or medals being handed back or anything like that.
No, seemingly not. But look, like I say, who knows? Because at the end of the day, they've got no control over how it goes. But in terms of the evidence that they're providing and the paperwork that they're providing and this kind of thing, it seems to be that they're certainly not worried about it. Let's put it that way.
It doesn't feel like it's going to slow down anytime soon either. As to what's to come this summer, you mentioned Aymeric Laporte there as a player who could potentially leave. Also Bernardo Silva last summer, which seems bizarre now when we look at the way he's played, had been strongly linked with Barcelona. All the speculation is that Jude Bellingham could well arrive at the Etihad. What are you hearing in terms of what their summer plans are?
Yeah, I mean, Bellingham's not decided yet. It's this, I can say this on my own podcast because people get it, but now I'm exposed to the world and people like this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I don't know for certain where Bellingham's going. I've got the feeling that he's going to City, but I wouldn't put my own money on it, let alone anyone else's. They want to do some work in midfield. The interesting thing about Bellingham is he's not a replacement for Gundogan and Bernardo Silva, and if those two go, they're going to need to get somebody else. That's why the Kovacic links are floating around, because you got a player with experience there, and somebody who's not going to be massively expensive. They do need work in midfield. They want fullbacks. I think a right winger, but they've got they're expecting players to move on. Calvin Phillips might even go. So you've got money up for Laporte, for Bernardo Silva, for Calvin Phillips. I think they might sell some young players in the summer too. So all of a sudden there, you're looking at a similar one to last year where they're bringing in, what are we looking at there? 150 to 200 million maybe, just on those kind of ones I mentioned. And that's just coming in. And then they made a profit last summer because they sold Sterling and Jesus and Zinchenko and a load of kids. So, yeah, I mean, people might roll their eyes at this, but there's money to spend.
There always is at City. Sam, great stuff as always.
Oh, anytime, guys. Thanks very much.
All our football and off the ball is brought to you by Sky. All the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch Premier League, Women's Super League, EFL, Scottish Premiership and much more. Live on Sky Sports.